The important thing is, whatever you decide to do you have passion? Do you have passion? Yes. Louder, louder. Yes. Are you passionate? Yes. Yes. Come on. Right. Good. We've got to be passionate. Slide. Passion. Unless we've got passion for any subject, anything we do, you're never going to be successful. You're never going to get anywhere. And we're certainly not going to save the world and sort out climate change and environments and so on. So we need passion. Climate change, environmental sustainability, implications for tourism and hospitality. Right, that's a lot of stuff. So I'm going to break it up. And we'll just talk about climate change to start with. Then we'll look at the environment, and we'll bring in tourism and hospitality and other things that affect it as we go. Now, this might sound a bit sort of different to what you read in the papers, hear on the news and so on. As far as I'm concerned, there is absolutely nothing we can do about climate change. And if anybody thinks there is, please put your hand up and tell me, because I don't know, nor does anybody in COP27 know, nor do any scientists or global leaders know. So, climate change. Anybody hear of King Canute? 11th century British monarch. Yeah, that's it. Well, he was Danish and he was British and he was all sorts of kings. But he had quite a high opinion of himself, and he thought he could control the sea and stop the sea and the tide coming in. And of course he couldn't. And the polar ice caps, right? Lots and lots of white reflecting the sun's rays back out into space. But now they're melting, and so there's less heat getting reflected back out to space, so they're melting faster. The glaciers are melting, the mountains, snows and ice is melting. And the more it melts, the more it warms up. So it's a self-perpetuating situation. Nothing we can do to stop that. So, in a way, talking about global warming and how we can find solutions to it, I think is quite a challenge. Okay, so another fact. Oxygen. Oxygen represents, 21% of the atmosphere, 79%, 78% nitrogen, and carbon dioxide, other gases make up the other percent. Now, I'm sure you all know this, so if I'm talking the obvious, I apologize. But oxygen comes mostly not from tropical rainforests. People talk about the lungs of the earth as the Amazon, but actually, where does oxygen come from most? 70% comes from phytoplankton in the oceans. Phytoplankton is really critically important. 70% of our oxygen comes from that. And it absorbs huge amounts of carbon dioxide as well. But in the last few decades, phytoplankton have been diminishing by about 40%. And this is mainly due to pollution in the oceans and latterly rising temperatures. But if they keep disappearing, there's no oxygen produced, then we go. And for some reason, nobody seems to talk about that much. There's another thing. Next slide, please. Seagrass. Seagrass covers a small percentage of the ocean floor, but it absorbs 50% more carbon dioxide than the same area of tropical rainforest. Now, seagrass is being consumed at an irreplaceable rate now by various predators. You may all think this is, what's this got to do with climate change? But I'm going to get round to it, so be patient and bear with me. Seagrass is disappearing at an irreplaceable rate because of various predators that are things like manatees. Can I have a slide? You're all familiar with manatees? Ever seen a manatee? Like a sea hippo. And they love seagrass. Now the thing is, sharks love manatees, but sharks are being killed off at an extraordinary rate. Slide. They're being hunted to extinction, with the result that manatees are flourishing, seagrass is disappearing, carbon catch is diminishing. So you see, sharks actually have a direct impact on global warming. And by the way, sharks are not as dangerous as people think. Slide. I don't know if you can see the detail there, but cows kill far more people a year than sharks do. It's just flagging up a thing for sharks. I have an NGO in Hong Kong to try and save sharks, so that's why I'm interested in sharks, but we're going to talk a bit more about that. We have a global imbalance. There's too many people with too little, right? And too few people with too much. And mankind has this collective deficit of humility and too often enjoys an unhealthy passion for greed. This imbalance needs correcting for our survival. All of these odd slides, I'm still coming back to survival, all right? Global warming, we're all going to die if we don't get things sorted. So it's to do with survival. The focus of the United Nations and world governments has been and continues to be working on solutions to fix global warming and compensate the most affected countries. Vast sums of money are being spent, much of which is either misdirected or wasted. And we know what that means, don't we? Can I have a slide? 2 slides. Wasted funds, wasted money. The international system, though, is directionless. It's chaotic, volatile. As international rules, institutions are being largely ignored. Can I have a slide? We have political paralysis. Look around. It's not just Pakistan where the government issues are all cranky. It's the whole world. Look at the UK. It's a complete mess. America, laughable. The whole world is in a mess on the political front. Post-COVID, countries are plagued by slower economic growth, widening societal divisions and political paralysis. Rafts of goals and objectives to tackle climate change have been agreed, many of which have target dates in the 2040s and 2050s. That's ridiculous. We'll all be dead by 2050. This is simply an abdication of responsibility, and most nations are simply paying lip service to these goals and objectives, and they have no realistic inclination or indeed ability to meet these targets and avoid the impending apocalypse. The slide. Oh, hang on. You're a bit ahead of me. Back. Go back. That's it. Okay. So last year, the COP26, which took place in the UK, it set out 4 goals. That's 2 threes, 1, 2, and 2 threes. Okay, secure global net zero emissions by mid-century and keep a maximum of 1.5 degrees increase. Adapt to protect communities and natural habitats, mobilize finance, and work together to deliver on these goals. I suppose you could argue that number 1 is a reasonable goal because it's at least measurable, but the others, the world community can't come up with better goals than those 2, 3, and 4. Anyway, most of these goals and the action plans that subsequently went with it have not been met. They haven't even been addressed by most countries. The same 4 goals have been adopted for COP27, which has just been finishing off in Egypt. The proposals, however, for fulfilling them are a bit more punchy. And if you're interested, I can show you that website later, and you can see the detail. However, all of these goals, all of these action plans, there is not one specific goal or initiative that focuses on the oceans. The oceans cover 70% of the world. That's where all the heart of the global warming issue is. And yet, these governments haven't started talking about the oceans. Confluence of conflict, climate change, natural and unnatural disasters, health issues such as pandemics, famine, environmental degradation, deforestation, that sort of thing. It poses unimaginable challenges for the world community combined. And this will inevitably spur global insecurity and vulnerabilities, as well as exacerbating existing fragilities around the world. The risks associated with a warming climate are clear. They include water and food insecurity. There's competition over scarce and diminishing resources, loss of livelihood, as well as climate-induced displacement. Next slide. And also, as well as governments trying to do stuff, business as usual in the corporate world. Major corporations such as logging, oil and gas exploration, cement, sugar, steel, all these companies continue on a business as usual basis, which is to say satisfying shareholder expectations for short-term returns and funding weak and malleable politicians to keep their hold on power. It's a very sad story, but while this system continues, we're not really going to get anywhere. I mean, one such example of corporate influence, at COP27, one of the main sponsors was Coca-Cola, who produce over 100 billion plastic bottles a year. And these degrade at about, 1,000 years to decompose? In the meantime, they break up into little pieces in the oceans and get into the food chain, and so we end up actually eating our plastic bottles and getting poisoned. It's not good, not good. The planet's oceans need much more attention than they're getting. Now, it's all sounded a bit gloomy, right, so far? And we're all going to burst into tears and there's no hope and we may go as well top ourselves. But I actually believe there are things that we can do which can make a difference. And I'm going to return to some specifics a bit later in the presentation. But if a greater share of global outlay of funds was spent to avert a global catastrophe could be directed towards the oceans and the well-being of the oceans, our situation could become far more tenable and we could have a brighter future to look forward to. So next, let's talk a bit about environmental sustainability. Having trashed the concept of being able to prevent global warming, we've got to look to do something that we can do something about. And also in the context of environmental sustainability, it's where the tourism bit comes in as well, because that's a huge industry and it's an area that we can actually make a difference. But before we go into that, we all hear about sort of eco-tourism, environmental sustainability. What does that actually mean? What does environmental sustainability mean? Any ideas? Here are some definitions. If you look up Wikipedia, which I do all the time, there's masses, 20, 30 definitions. Here are 4. I just want to go through those together because there's something important that comes out of it. One definition: a responsibility to conserve natural resources and project global ecosystems to support health and well-being now and in the future. Another one: responsible interaction with the environment to avoid depletion or degradation of natural resources and allow for long-term environmental quality. The United Nations defines sustainability simply as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And another one, responsibly interacting with the planet to maintain natural resources and avoid jeopardizing the ability for future generations to meet their needs. So it's all about the future. Future. Environmental sustainability, you said it, yeah, we want it to be nice for now, but we've got to get it right now for the future. And that means it's about the health and well-being of mountains and forests, rivers and oceans, grasslands and deserts, about our way of life and how we interact with these areas and regions. Slide. In the context of tourism, these environments most definitely need protecting. Actually, not just tourism, development generally. We topped 8 billion people on the planet this week, right? Was it yesterday? I don't know who's doing the counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, but 8 billion people. And that means we need more space, we need to encroach upon more land to build more housing. And honestly, it's these things, the ocean, the forest, the land, it's all getting encroached upon because humans need it, but we have to protect it. So in the context of tourism, these areas and environments definitely need our protection. We've got to consider what we eat. We have to consider how we manage our waste responsibly. We've got to care for each other and the things around us, and we must educate each other to understand these precious and fragile relationships between the environment and tourism. Tourism, a blessing or a curse? It can be a blessing and a curse. It can provide valuable revenues for communities and countries, but unless managed sustainably and carefully, it can destroy environments, can destroy cultures, rivers, oceans, and all living things along the way. You may think I'm exaggerating, but consider this. Plastic is something that we cannot do without at the moment, but we are very bad at cleaning it up. So I want you to come on a journey with me, and we're going to be accompanied by a little blue plastic bag and a plastic water bottle. Our journey begins far away in the north, up in Gilgit, Baltistan, up in the mountains, where visitors and tourists go and they see the lovely mountains. They have a picnic and then they just throw away their rubbish, throw it on the ground. They don't think about it. It's not because they're bad or wicked, it doesn't connect. They haven't had boring old people like me going around telling them not to do it. And our little blue plastic bag and our bottle of water make new friends along the way. Kagan Valley, a beautiful, gorgeous part of the world. And look at it now. It's horrible. People building things like that on the side of the river. And where do you think all the sewage goes from these hotels? Into the river. Because they certainly don't care about looking after it and treating it properly. Our journey continues. Next slide. And all this waste goes into the rivers and makes its fateful journey down to the sea. It absorbs more and more pollutants on the way from factories, towns, hotels. And heavy metals get into the system. Mercury, lead, arsenic. All of these sort of things getting dumped into the rivers. How can we do that? And on the way downstream, it kills all these important, precious creatures. You know this? Yeah, blind river dolphin, Indus river dolphin. It has a number of names. This is back to your sort of speciality subjects, I guess. I don't know. But, these creatures are becoming extinct for several reasons. Pollution is one of the main ones, but damming the rivers is also keeping their gene pool from growing and extending, so they are getting into smaller areas. Fishing, is another area that's giving them a problem. There's only about 1,500 left in the Indus, and it's shrinking. And in the Ganges, where the species is also there, there's about 3,500. Soon the rivers get choked with all the rubbish. Drains become blocked, and then when it rains, we have big floods. Anybody from Karachi? So if you've been to Karachi when there have been some rains, all of this gets into the drains and nothing moves and it all just floods up. It's terrible. And then finally it reaches the sea. And then it just floats around, poisoning the great oceans and killing the creatures within them. And you find whales getting washed up all the time on beaches all over the world. And you open them up and you've got all this rubbish inside them. Because they see things around, they don't know if it's, they can't ask the questions, is that good for me to eat or not? It looks like it's right, so we'll eat it. Turtles, for example, like jellyfish. A plastic bag floating in the water looks like a jellyfish. Eat it. The poisons from the rubbish create other terrible problems, including red tide. Have you heard of red tide? So it's an algae that sort of grows and floats around in huge areas, huge spaces. And it suffocates the ocean. It prevents oxygen getting into the ocean, and no oxygen, and fish die. Next slide. And you find this washed up on beaches when there's been a red tide event. And, this is an unforgivable abuse of our home. And it's all because somebody threw away their little blue plastic bag in a plastic bottle of water on a mountaintop 2,000 kilometers away. But that act equals that. You see the connectivity. So I've said it's too late to stop global warming, and I personally believe that to be the case. And I think it's too late to even slow down the process. But that is not to say we do nothing to develop and protect a more sustainable environment for ourselves and for the future generations. And this in turn, if we do that and do it efficiently, because it is possible, that can then lead to a reduction in the speed and the acceleration process of global warming. So let's now be specific and consider some actual workable solutions that can be taken to make a difference. Okay? It's all been a bit theoretical so far, but there are things we can do. Slide. First, there must be instituted a massive drive to legislate against waste and chemical dumping in rivers. And surely this is not beyond the bounds of possibility, to lobby our politicians to say this is not acceptable. Our lack of concern for the environment is unforgivable, and the polluting of rivers and hence the seas can be prevented if there's a collective will to do so. Indeed, the whole process of waste management actually around the world, not just here but everywhere, is something that needs a lot of improving. But that's another story we'll talk about another time. Second, linked to waste management is the astonishing fact that so little has been done to reduce the production of single-use products. Our commitment must be to legislate against this. We've known for a long time that these things are wrong. Anybody knows it, but we use it with a compulsion, and they block our drains, pollute our seas, kill our fish. If mankind has a future, there is no place in it for these things. Next time I come here, and I hope I'll be asked again, but maybe you won't want me to come here again, let there never be one of these things. Honestly. Stick it into these and use it again. Every hotel I've worked in or business that I've run, it wasn't mentioned at the beginning. I have a consulting business now talking about tourism and hospitality and developing it sustainably, not just in this country, everywhere. But before that, I've been running hotels and building hotels. You know, Serena in Islamabad? Right, I built that. In 1999, I came here. It was a green field. I was a pre-opening general manager and project manager. For 2 years, I was boots, jeans, digging, watching the donkey wallers carrying the mud out. You know, it was, anyway, every place I've worked in since, I don't know, 1975, these have been banned. We don't have plastic bottles. We have jugs of water at conferences. We have glass bottles. But we don't have single-use plastics. It's not difficult to legislate against this. We can do that. Next slide. My friends, the sharks. I love sharks. Anybody done any scuba diving? Yeah? No? Okay. In Greece. You probably didn't see any sharks there, did you? No. Okay. Well, the biggest excitement you can do is to go diving with these chaps. And it's not dangerous. You understand the rules, it's okay. And you touch them and they feel like sandpaper on your hand. And the first time I did it, I'm just going to go on about it because I love it. I'm passionate about sharks. The first time I was taken into the water and I was sort of a bit nervous. We just lay down on the bottom of the ocean where we knew there's going to be some sharks coming by. And suddenly there's a little flutter in the distance and the shark comes and he comes up to me. He comes up to me. And he goes, I go, and then there's another movement there. And there's another one, another. And suddenly there's about 15 of these guys saying hi. And it was sensational. And ever since then, whenever I can, I go and dive with these guys. And you know, respect their environment, respect their rules, and you have a very positive experience. Anyway, we digress. Sharks are being killed to extinction. There's been a 90% reduction of the shark population in the last 30 years. They are the apex predator of the ocean. They keep the oceans in order and in balance. But they're being hunted. Slide. They're being hunted for shark fin soup, which, I don't know if you've ever had it, but it's tasteless. Shark's fin is just like a bit of hair. It has no nutritional value whatever, but it's an aspirational dish in many parts of the world. Food for animal food, for goodness sake. People food. Slide. They're being killed for beauty products, cosmetics. Slide. They're being killed for accessories, bags, belts, wallets, shoes. And they're being killed just for all of these things. Incidentally, the country, any idea which country consumes most shark? No. You'd think so, but it isn't. It's Brazil. Brazil, who are also not just killing everything in the ocean, but they're killing all the tropical rainforests as well, or have been. Maybe this new president will sort it out. Second is Italy, with all the beauty products and the accessories. China is third for the food. What we have to do is put a complete ban on the killing and hunting of sharks. Because I showed you earlier, they're killing, or they used to kill the manatees, and the manatees are now flourishing and they're eating all the seagrass, so the carbon dioxide catch is not taking place. Now, in 1946, that's even before I was born, I think. In 1946, the first treaties to ban the hunting of whales was enacted. This is doable. Whales are now coming back fine until they eat the plastic, but they're doing fine. It's a healthier population. We can legislate to stop the killing of sharks, of ocean-going fishing boats. Set out, there's thousands of them at a time, largely from China. They go across the Pacific and they just collect and sweep up everything in their path. Everything, totally indiscriminately. They all just put a sort of long net between them all. And for example, between the Galapagos Islands and the mainland of South America, which is a main migratory route of fish and whales and sharks and all sorts of things, they kill everything. A couple of hours catch. And everything's in it. Most, or a lot of that, is totally unusable. They throw it away, back into the ocean, because it's too small for commercial use. They catch it and it's dead. And they are just plundering the oceans. This has to be stopped, and bottom trawling, which destroys the sea floor as well. This can be legislated against. And this plundering of slide, seagrass gets destroyed as well. And all of this causes the fish stocks to plummet. If we had a really good effort to plant seagrass on an industrial scale, we could increase our carbon capture immeasurably. Now, a few organizations are doing it, but it's very small. But we could plant seagrass and we could increase our carbon capture. And that would have a link to the global warming issue. And at the same time, if we did that, these other creatures would start making a comeback. Seahorses. Ever seen a seahorse? Yeah, about that big. They're lovely little creatures. But they're getting wiped out as their habitat goes. So, seagrass. Plant seagrass. It's not rocket science. Right, okay, so further action. We need to be doing risk assessments on a global scale to address what's going to happen. We need to understand what's going to happen. Followed by programs of mitigation, crisis management planning, and more importantly, slide, education on an epic scale. Because as I was saying earlier, I don't think most people go to the mountains and throw their plastic and their rubbish onto the mountainside with a malicious intent. It's just because nobody's told them that it's wrong and why it's wrong. I've started doing a series of talks at schools, but I'm starting at 3 and 4-year-olds talking about this because they get it. And then I'm doing the sort of 3 to 7, then 7 to 12. And then the day after that, I talk to their parents. And, you know, it's a question of getting the message across. We need to not only educate, but change the way we think. We have to really adjust and alter our behavior patterns. Because if we don't, we've had it, ladies and gentlemen. And you, please, study hard, but don't just write this off as another talk from a cranky English guy who came over and interfered with our morning routine. But take this message with you, even if you don't throw litter around. Tell other people not to throw litter around. It's just a simple start, but we really need to do it. We know that there are going to be great conflagrations of forest fires all over the world. We're going to have bigger storms and hurricanes. And we're going to have rising sea levels that will inundate low-lying regions and coastal cities. We know this is coming. Slide. That's just a speculative look at New York in 20 years with sea rising. It's so low, you don't need much to have this. But we know in the meantime, now we're getting this. And the floods this year weren't new. We've had this, what was it, 10 years ago? Huge, massive flooding. And each year there's a bit, but, you know. So let's, you know, I was talking about mitigation and action plans, risk assessment and so on. We know this is going to happen again. It's no question. So what should we be doing now about this? Building the roads a bit higher, hoping to put some trenches in or some damming. We're just sort of, that's not doing anybody a favour. We need to be looking at a big solution because the floods are going to keep coming. So maybe the people need relocating completely. And we're talking about a lot of people, 33 million people affected. And I talk about risk assessment and coming up with solutions to mitigate against these issues. That's the sort of direction we should be looking at. Hard to see how tourism and hospitality have a place here, even for discussion with this background of doom and gloom. But there are opportunities. And this is exactly where these opportunities lie, and a chance to educate and enlighten people all over the world, to become our ambassadors and our soldiers to encourage necessary change. Because if we do change, we can get this sorted. In Pakistan, we've got a rich and wonderful country with places of great beauty. This country has got everything. It's the most fantastic country. Next. We've got places where heritage and culture, art, poetry and food are steeped in magnificent tradition, with a cradle and host to whole religions. And we can offer, next, we can offer adventures like nowhere else on earth. Everything, scuba diving, skiing, parasailing. And anybody done white water rafting? We can also showcase what unplanned, unregulated, short-term, greed-focused tourism development can do. Murray, before, after. Last Eid, the road to Swat. What a joy to be in that traffic jam. Local hotel construction, when you get there. I mean, some of these got washed away recently, but this is unregulated. This is nonsense. And then slide, in our capital city, right under the noses. You know, this sort of thing cannot be allowed. We can demonstrate the devastating impact of climate change on our fragile environment. This last year I've been developing a hotel in Karimabad up in the north. And the Karakoram highway has been a nightmare. It's different every time you drive on it. But that's the Karakoram highway during the summer. And the catastrophic, this was just near Hunza, bridge collapsing, and all this was not rains. This was catastrophic collapse at the end of glaciers, where the melt suddenly built up too much water and huge amount of water, rocks, everything just came down the valley, wiped away the roads, wiped away the bridges. So we can show what the impact is of climate change here. We can show what wonderful things we have to offer, how great this country is, how great it can be for tourism. But we can also show that if you don't manage it right, what a mess you can make of it. I just want to talk about this resort for a moment. It's not so much as a sales pitch, but this is an example of a business that invested in a hotel and tourism development project with a complete focus on environmental sustainability. I'm just going to go through a few facts about it with you because I think it's worth doing so to show that this doesn't have to be unique. Anybody that is building a hotel or a resort can do this. It's just as easy to do it right as it is to do it wrong. It just needs a little more thought. And of course, hiring a good consultant. Available. Okay, so off to resort. The construction materials that were used. The wood was either second-hand wood or wood that was collected from landslides, and sustainable planted sources for this use. The stone blocks were used and carved and chipped away by masons. They weren't factory produced. Paint that is used in the project is made from a sustainable product which does not use chemicals, arsenic, mercury, lead. The roofing and a large part of the walls up there. Have you been to Karimabad? Yeah. Seen Baltistan Fort? 800 years old, whatever, 1,000 years old.
Some of our students are from Karimabad.
Okay. So we use the same technique to build the sort of roofs and the walls as Baltistan Fort did. They had it right 1,000 years ago, and it's lasted. So it's just as easy to do this as it is to do it with bricks, cement. Horrible. Additionally, they have a zero slide, please. Slide. They have a zero tolerance to single-use plastic. They're still struggling a bit with the water bottles, but every time I visit, they hide them all away. But they're developing glass bottles now, which are fillable. If you know Karimabad, the water there is, well, if you're not familiar with Karimabad and you go to have a glass of water, it's a bit sort of muddy, looks, but we purify the water. So we have a purification plant in this resort. So you have crystal clear water you can drink out of the tap. We manage our own sewage. We manage our own waste. And we plant hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of trees. And another important thing about sustainability and working with the environment is working with communities, working in the community there, and particularly, slide please. So working with farmers, so we provide them with seeds, with livestock, animals, with a guarantee to buy back from them what they produce. And so everybody's a winner. You know, the hotel wins, the local community wins, our visitors, our guests, our tourists, they win because they have good, fresh, pure products, and no chemical fertilizers are used, no false animal feed is used. It's all organic and natural. So, you know, let Pakistan be champions in the world of tourism. We can be a champion. We've got everything. We can do this, but we've got to have the will. Let Pakistan turn its reputational negatives into positives. Let us be inspirational. Let us show what we can do. We can show examples of best practices. We can turn big downsides into great upsides with all stakeholders benefiting. But ladies and gentlemen, I do not believe our fate is irrevocably sealed. But it's getting close. You know, the oceans give us life, but if we continue abusing them and poisoning nature, the planet will become unlivable in. And mankind will fade into history, becoming just another one of planet Earth's tenants. As the last remaining people pass into oblivion, our children and grandchildren, they will curse us and previous generations for failing them and letting this catastrophe happen. And aliens from outer space will come and visit this planet, and they'll look and slide. And here we come back to the link with Anthropology department. Says it all, doesn't it? Finding the key, ladies and gentlemen, to a secure future, it may be wishful thinking. The scale of change needed for long-term security of the human race is almost unimaginable. But I certainly want to look for that key. I want to find the solutions. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks a lot for a thought-provoking lecture by Mr. Charles Barker. I think it's our responsibility to care about the environment because we have only one planet to live. Mother Earth is crying and is weeping at what we have done to the nature. All our theories of development, environment are anthropocentric and androcentric and most of the time Eurocentric. So we have to think about the local solutions to the environment, and as you people know that Pakistan is most vulnerable in the list of climatic change countries which will be affected because of this climatic change. You have seen the consequences of these floods recently. I mean, we have seen millions of people are displaced, and Department of Anthropology is going to arrange one workshop in December on this topic: displacement, disease, and disaster. We would also welcome you in that conference if you are around.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think it's our responsibility because most of the students in this class are anthropology of globalization, and also some students from anthropology of development. So, and also some other departments, which I don't know, different departments. So it's our responsibility because globalization doesn't mean brands. It also means, global warming. How it brings consumerism and the impact of consumerism on our life, which we saw in the slides. I mean, how can we control consumerism and, controlled globalization, which is more human-centric and more also, environment friendly. It also relates with the, tourism. Tourism is also part of globalization, global economy, but also we need to work for the environment because Mother Earth is crying again. So each of us, we have a responsibility, to think about. For example, a lot of species in northern areas like brown bear are endangered species. And what other species? Ibex, yeah, Himalayan ibex and snow leopards. They are endangered species. So you see, and also in the Indus River, there are a lot of myths regarding the Indus River, and also we have done research on these topics. So your topic was, is really thought-provoking, and it talks about the responsibility. And the global South and the global North, both of us have a responsibility as individual. So now the session is open for questions. Please raise your hands. And
my name is Yanis. I'm from Anthropology second semester. First of all, thank you for providing insight about climate change and our part in the climate colossal. So my question is that the implications or the suggestion you mentioned was purely on micro level. What we are doing in the global scale and in the macro level. For example, we have seen in the COP27, which was organized by mega corporation and politicians. There was not any climate activist like Stephen Donziger, Greta Thunberg, or Mr. Charles Barker over there. So, and another issue we have is the resurge of coal production and consumption worldwide due to the political crisis in Ukraine. So, can we hope to mitigate these climate changes using this micro level implication, or just we need some bigger narratives to cope this climate change on a global scale?
Okay, I think, I went on a couple of times about education, and it is beholden upon us all to get this message across. Now, we can do that talking to families. We can do it standing up in front of lecture halls. 2 weeks ago, I was at a conference in Lahore, which had more of an international component. We have the ability to talk to politicians. We have the ability to influence what is going on in our political environments, Pakistan, but globally. So there is an opportunity to say and make known what you feel and what is important for these values. Now, it's a big task, and if we look at our own country, the system of let us say influencing political agendas is not straightforward, but maybe it will be soon. The point is, let's not give up. Let's look positively to the future. Let's look positively about how we can influence politicians, schools, people generally, and spread the word.
So my question is that you mentioned multiple factors of environmental crisis, from animals to drainage and all, but what about the fossil fuels that most of our power systems and vehicles are powered by fossil fuels, and that emit chlorofluorocarbons that are continually getting that ozone layer depleting and making us exposed to those UV layers that are causing our glaciers washing out and affecting our certain species that's mentioned. And whenever we go to some alternative for washing out or eliminating the fossil fuel vehicles or fossil fuel system, everyone mentions that we should move to solar powered vehicles or chargeable vehicles, electric operated vehicles. But in Pakistan, I have oftenly experienced that only elites have that cars, and their power stations there from which they are charging their cars through electricity, they are powered by diesel. So and I want to add something. He mentioned that COP27 just held, which was attended by our Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. After attending COP7 at Sharm el-Sheikh, he stated that Pakistan needs $378 billion to get what Pakistan has lost in the form of climate change. So 378 billion. If we are able to manage that huge amount, $378 billion, then yet it takes 30 years to cope that what we have lost. And I am afraid that Pakistan didn't even manage to get $30 billion to calm the environment that we lost in recent floods by displacing people. It displaced some people and restore our infrastructure. So what is future of Pakistan to climate change?
Okay, so there's a few points there. Let me try and address them. First, you talked about fossil fuels, and you're absolutely right. The continuous dependence upon fossil fuels is not going to help us. It's contributing to the destruction of the environment. Indeed, the earth, it's contributing to our termination. But I did mention that there needs to be legislation against organizations that are responsible for producing these pollutants. And we need to have a far more energized approach to dropping our dependence upon fossil fuels. Now, you are absolutely right. Electric cars is not the solution, because where does the electricity come from? Burning fossil fuels to make electricity? No, nonsense. There is actually another solution relating to electricity. Well, we know about the sort of wind power and solar power and hydroelectricity, these sort of things. But I mentioned waste management. Now, waste management, it's all very well saying don't dump your litter on the mountain if you don't have a litter bin to put the litter in. And it's no good having litter bins if you don't have a collection process to empty the litter bins. And it's no good having that process to empty the litter bins if you don't have a method of disposal of the junk and separating it and recycling and so on. And if your solution is just to dump it in the landfill or burn it with all the pollutants that then go up into the air, that's not a solution either. Now, there are new systems of incineration for effective waste management which contain everything and at the same time create and generate electricity. And in Europe, not everywhere yet, but it's starting. The trucks that go to collect the waste are electric, powered by the generated electricity from the recycling plant and the waste disposal plant. So you have another connection and a loop working there. And there is a company that is working in Lahore now, championing this. And it's first steps. And goodness knows this country needs waste management everywhere, not just Pakistan though, everywhere needs effective waste management. But if one takes this model and rolls it out, then one is starting to find practical solutions. And that energy, so if you have waste cycling places all over the place and you're using alternative methods of generating electricity, then one's got the alternative to promote. Electricity, fossil fuels. You started delving into risky territory with the political issues. And I think it's best that I don't start saying what I think about the political scenario in Pakistan or anywhere else. That's another discussion. Funding reparations. It's not just Pakistan. Everybody's asking for it. Lots of nations. The whole of Oceania, the Pacific Islands, and they're all suffering badly. And the scale of reparations, if you like, is so big, it's never going to happen. And sadly, ladies and gentlemen, in Pakistan, with its reputation for not handling foreign loans as efficiently as perhaps they ought to be, nobody has a particular taste for giving $350 billion to help reparations of flood damage. It's not going to happen. Or at least it's not going to happen with the current regime and the way our political processes happen here. It isn't to say that it can't happen and that it won't happen, but as things stand at the moment, our reputation is not good. So I think we have to sort out internally our arrangements and to be able to present to the world a better sense of integrity in our business processes and our political processes, and show that we can, we're a responsible player in the global community. And then we can start getting more help and support. It's a big subject. It's I'll get arrested if I go on.
Yeah.
There was somebody, yes,
gentleman over there.
coming
Sir,
to you.
as you talk about the plastics, it is becoming more challengeable for us nowadays. As we're a mighty organization, UNO, we haven't seen a UNO having any sanctions upon the countries. They are consuming more plastic, like USA, like another countries, China. They are consuming more plastics. So what the UNO is doing to have sanctions upon them to stop the productions of plastics?
Okay,
So-
I mean,
anything UNO is doing for them?
I'm not aware of any specific initiative, but I don't think it's a difficult one to to address. You know, if countries say, right, McDonald's, okay, and all fast food chains, okay, there will be no plastic throwaway disposable bags to put your burger in. There will be no plastic disposable cups to put your Coke in. There will be no plastic straws to stick into the Coke. That's a legislative process. You just say, this cannot happen anymore. Find a solution. They can find a solution. Biodegradable products exist. Lots of shops you go to now, you don't get a plastic bag, you get a degradable material for your shopping. Do you like ice cream? Yeah. Oh, I eat lots of it. You can tell. But so, and I like to go to Fresco, because Fresco's got really good homemade ice cream, right? But I take a pot with me and say, fill it up. I don't go and say I want some ice cream and they put it in those horrible plastic things that chip and break and then clutter up and go into the ocean and stay there for 1,000 years. You know, this is doable. We know the solutions, but it has to be legislated, because unless it's legislated, and more importantly, that legislation is then enforced. Because that's another problem we have in Pakistan, but in many other places. The legislation exists, but it isn't then enforced. You know, shut up, leave me alone. Yeah. And blind eye. So enforcement is as much a part of the process as legislation in the first place. But it is not that difficult to say to all the big producers of and users of plastic, you can't do it anymore, guys. And you as individuals, when you go to McDonald's or you go to Kentucky Fried Chicken or whatever it is, take your own container. It's just as easy, and use it again, wash it up and then take it again. You use these for your water, you know? Why not? Take another one to put Coke in it. And for those of you that have the inclination, it also disguises putting booze in it when you go to the restaurant. It's actually vodka I'm drinking, it's not really water. Okay. Next. Sorry, you had a question.
We have certain paleontological records on the basis of which we have suffered and we gone through certain ice ages. The last we had suffered glacial period. Now we are suffering the interglacial period. And after that, the last glacier was somehow 25,000 years ago, the last ice age, which is considered to be one of the most and vital major factors that also played a vital role in the extinction of Homo neanderthal as well. But now, after the agricultural revolution, this economic transition or human life transition from the hunter-gatherers to somehow the agriculturists or pastoralists or now capitalism, what happened to our abilities? Are we still have these adaptation, the power and the stamina of adapting the environment and to cope with all these problems that occurring time to time with us? If somehow 50,000 or 60,000 years the next ice age come or some oblivion like you mentioned there, if it comes, what would be the human these potentials would do? Or still, is it copable with this oblivion or some environmental conditions or not?
Yeah, I think there's a big difference to the last ice age, and Homo sapiens was just sort of, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but Homo sapiens was just getting started, and there was Homo neanderthal perhaps more affected. But the big difference between them adapting to climate change, however long ago that was, and today, is the numbers. 8 billion people now. You can't run. You know, in northern Asia and Europe, as the ice started coming down, everybody just sort of walked away and moved south. And the size of the global population was, I mean, you know perhaps better than I do, but it wasn't a lot of people. They could move, they could adapt just by going somewhere warmer. We can't move 8 billion people around to suit the climate now. And I think that's the challenge for us, because as people do try to move, then you get this conflict that I mentioned, and you get, you know, food scarcity, you get insecurity of water resources, insecurity of livelihoods, and people go to war on that basis. And you know, we end up blowing each other to pieces, and we have the capability to destroy ourselves so easily now, which they didn't have before. So I think as a species now, we are very vulnerable, probably a lot more so than we were at that time. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I see it. I think it's the sheer numbers of people that have changed that makes the difference.
I think it's very pertinent what you have said, that we are going on a self-destruction path because of the Anthropocene era in which we are, and I think we have to think about it.
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you so much, sir, for your enlightening talk. So I have actually 3 queries from the lecture. First one is, we have seen some major measures by the climatic activists. Like we seen, it's a story from 3 days back, some climatic activists, they threw some oil at a painting in Vienna. And then there's a story from a few weeks back that NASA scientists and some climatic activists, they chained themselves to the JP Morgan bank. So I just want your critique onto this, like whether it is the right ways or the wrong ways, or whatever you critique onto that. Secondly, you mentioned some biodegradable products. So whether are we working onto some plastic which is biodegradable, so we can, you know, use it as an alternative. And thirdly, you mentioned that being a students or being the individuals, we have to play our part into this climatic issue. So can you actually guide us to some NGOs or some to communities or societies working for that cause, for which we can be part of, and then we can play our major role, and we can actually consume our capabilities to the maximum. Thank you so much. It means a lot.
You know, I suppose some of the big advances and changes over the years of human history have happened by some extreme action like that. So women getting the vote, getting recognition in whatever a year it was, throwing themselves under horses at races in the UK, or chaining themselves. It got a lot of attention, which perhaps activated people to think about it more. And I personally don't think it's a good thing to throw oil at paintings. You can throw it at politicians if you like, but I don't think throwing it at paintings helps. I think reasoned, forceful argument is the more responsible approach. But hey, you know, to get attention, sometimes you need to do something a bit more extreme. Was that the first question or the second one? First one. Second one was? Yeah, plastic. So the thing is, plastic in any of its manifestations starts off with oil. So basically, can't we just leave it in the ground and find some other solution? You know, I'm afraid I don't know the answer specifically if there is a plastic that is more friendly for the environment than another. I suppose there probably is. But I'm afraid I don't know the answer. It is far better to have a product that is made from fabrics and clearly biodegradable, and I think that is the way to look at it. That's a personal thing. As to NGOs and who you can join up with and get more research, there are thousands. I can certainly give you a list of some, particularly regarding the oceans, which is something I'm more involved in. But just in Islamabad, there are hundreds of, whether it's water, whether it's agricultural, whether it's feeding programs, whether it's WWF is quite well represented in Pakistan. Sometimes difficult to get hold of, but anyway, so I can certainly provide you with a list, or if you do a Google search, you'll see NGOs in Pakistan or NGOs worldwide. I can give you my NGO and you can join up and help with that. Yeah, it's very worthwhile.
The core and the peripheral countries, who is more responsible in changing the climate?
So if we take China, their power, they have what, 1.3 billion people, I think, and they need energy, they need electricity, and so far their main approach has been coal, and their entire country and system is based on coal. Now, to say, right, tomorrow, no more coal-fired generation of electricity, it's not that easy. Now, nuclear is a source of energy which, in the right managed hands, is a very good and efficient and clean system. But the investment and the scale of it to roll that out around the world is huge. Europe has largely been dependent on fossil fuels, coal burning, and so on, and America. There are countries that don't have that resource and haven't used that. But I suppose probably those industrial countries that have been able to use a lot of coal to generate their industries are the more advanced countries now. Do they bear responsibility? Do they have to compensate other countries that haven't done it? If I say to you, you've got lots of money and I don't have lots of money, please give me some money because I need it. You say, no, go and earn it. It's in theory, it's poor countries that haven't contributed to global warming, like Pakistan. Global community, please give us 357 billion to sort out the flood relief program. They're not going to get it. We're not going to be able to pay the interest on the most recent loan from the IMF. And the IMF isn't going to give us any more, because half of it's gone into whose bank accounts, which has now been flown somewhere else anyway. So we've got to sort out our domestic arrangements.
My question is that in the efforts of developing a world where we reduce the process of climate change, we work for the environment-friendly or sustainable development. So there's absolutely no chance for a war or warfare. So do you think the countries are ready for that? And you talked about legislations. We cannot get legislations until the countries or the government's consent. So do you think the countries or the powerful countries are ready for that step?
Did you say about war?
Yes.
Yeah. I think the whole world is ready for a good bust-up. We are far less in harmony globally today than we were 10 years ago. Everybody's looking for a scrap. It's pathetic. You look at Russia and Ukraine, and America wants to interfere with everybody's business and send it, if China wants to go and have a word with Taiwan, is America going to go to war with China over it? There's a treaty that says they have to. If Russia comes over the border from Ukraine and goes into Poland or Germany, it doesn't bear thinking about. And it's not just those big superpowers. You know, most countries in Africa hate their neighbors and want to have a scrap, even within the countries. We are a very, very unpleasant animal, us humans. We are aggressive and mean and greedy and self-centered, and as pressures mount and resources become scarce, then we don't look to how we can find a solution ourselves. We want to go and take it. Yeah. So I think as a species, we are very, very vulnerable at the moment. And it's going to take a lot of luck as well as skillful, powerful leadership to steer us through the next decade or so.
Yeah, and also the future wars will be on the water wars, the natural resources.
Yeah, yeah. The UK has a huge crisis at the moment of funding and money. It's got inflation off the scale. It can't afford to pay its teachers. It can't afford to pay its national health, its transport, its local governments. It's in a real mess. At the same time, while they try to look for increasing taxes and raise money to find solutions, they've just announced they're going to build 4 more state-of-the-art battleships, 2 new aircraft carriers, and a new generation Trident missile system. Why? You know, they think, I'm a Brit, but they think they're still a global empire. Honestly. Fortunately, the Indians are running it now, so maybe that'll change and the colonial idea will be reversed. But you know, if countries, advanced countries like the UK, are developing advanced military capability, I mean, I think that is just appalling. And you know, we need to start thinking of spending it on our people, on our infrastructure, on our environment, and looking after ourselves and the planet and each other, not how we can kill each other more efficiently.
Second, my question is that many of the developing countries producing CO2 and any other experiments, and due to this, the many periphery countries and you can say third world countries affected by global warming. So what are the causes or what are the steps taken by the developed countries to overcome this situation or global warming? Thank you so much.
Well, the steps that they're officially taking are things like the COP27 annual conference, or 26, 27, whatever. These get-togethers of the world's leaders to find solutions to address exactly what you've asked about. How do we support Pakistan, which is being negatively affected, one of the most affected countries in the world, by other people's behavior? But as I pointed out, you know, they talk a lot for 2 weeks in a very nice, fancy environment, and they come up with virtually they come up with good words, good targets, good, you know, say, we will reduce our coal dependency by X% by the year 2050. I mean, you know, it's 30 years away. If things carry on as they are, we're not going to be here in 30 years. So, you know, the UN, these global conferences, they exist, and the objective is to find solutions. But we're very bad at coordinating and then taking action. I think there's only out of 177 countries in COP26 last year that agreed and signed up to take action on the goals and the objectives that were set. I think 23 countries only have done anything, and they haven't, any of them, met the full goals. You know, so it's pretty gloomy. So I think, you know, if we wait and leave it to world leaders to sort this, we've had it. It's going to be us you, me, talking to people and putting pressure collectively on corporations. You know, if you say, right, we are never going to go to a fast food joint again, and we're going to tell all our friends, and that word ripples around to the extent that enough people are not going to fast food places until they change their plastic policy, the plastic policy will change that quickly. And that's going to be driven by you guys, not somebody in government who's relying on Coca-Cola and McDonald's to fund their next election. Are you passionate? Yes. I am passionate. We're going to sort this. Yes? Yes. Good. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.